Hi everybody, Nigel with you, Nigel's Modelling Bench. Welcome back. And here we are now with part 2 of the beginner's build of this lovely new little kit from Airfix. This is the Austin Katie ambulance, and for obvious reasons with recent goings on, it's quite an appropriate build really, isn't it? So for those of you that are new to my channel, welcome along. Those of you that are coming back for another look at another video, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up, and be sure to hit the like button, and be sure to hit the notifications bell. That way you'll get notified when I get new videos coming out. And if you don't like the video, hit the dislike twice. That annoys people, but never mind. Right, so basically I've chosen this kit over the Gecko one purely for its simplicity. The radiator grille in this kit is vastly different than the one in the Gecko models kit. I personally believe this one is correct, but I still haven't done my reference yet to see what's going on. But anyway, that aside, this is a beginner's build. We're going back to basics, guys. We're going back to, you know, how to cut parts off sprues, how to remove sprue nibs, how to apply glue, stuff like that. So, and we're going to be using some really simple tools. I'm not going to be using any big fancy tools or anything. If you saw part 1, you'll know what it's all about. So the first thing we need to do, as it says in the instructions and as I talked about in part 1, is get the sprues washed. Now, it's a very controversial subject. Most people don't bother. I would say that probably 9 times out of 10 you don't need to. But, you know, when the manufacturer says wash the sprues, I think you should wash the sprues. I certainly have, I have one kit in particular which you can physically get your finger wet with oil off it. So it's, you know, it's worth doing, especially when it comes to the painting stages. If all the paint just falls off, and especially if you're using water-based paints, they won't stick to plastic very well at the best of times. If you've got any grease on it whatsoever, they really won't stick. So, you know, and a lot of people say, what's the point in doing it? Because you're handling the parts with your hands, and however much you wash your hands, you're going to have grease in your skin. Yeah, you could always wipe it over with IPA, but this is sort of getting the oil out of the nooks and crannies and, you know, crevices and places where the oil might be. So I'm going to do it. You don't have to. If you want to do it, I'll show you how. So let's get down to my utility room and we'll get the parts washed, rinsed and then drained. Okay, so here we are at the sink. So, right, first thing, make sure the water is warm. Usually houses, it takes a minute for the hot water to come through, so I've done that. So I'll put the plug in the sink, and then we can leave that squirting forward. Yeah, so we don't need gallons, we just need, you know, enough to submerge the parts really. And we've only got these 3 sprues, so it's a bit too much cold going in there, so we'll turn the hot up a bit. And then we'll get a drop of washing up, because this is literally how much you need, okay? That's it. It's half a thimbleful, you use nothing much at all. Okay, so that's sort of, like I say, you don't want it, if you have it too cold, the degreasing action will suffer. If you have it too hot, you may warp your parts, so you need to be very careful. So that's going to be absolutely fine. So I've got like 2 inches of water in there. That's absolutely plenty. And we've got plenty of bubbles on this. I know we've got plenty of soap in there. So it's all good. So all I'm going to do is take my parts. Now, as I said in part 1, we've got really nice sprues here with lovely, you know, good connecting points. The parts are on the nice and solid. We're not going to lose any bits. So we can literally just submerge that in there. And what I'm going to do is just agitate it up and down, just like that, and that is enough to wash the parts. I'm not going to go brushing them or anything, because you might knock some off the sprue. So that can stay in. I'm just going to add a little drop more cold, because I feel on this side it's a little bit too hot. So just swirl that around a bit. That's better. Right, and then do the same. Now this sprue here, as you can see, is too big to fit. So what I'm going to do is just pull it up on one end, just do that side. Okay, turn it over, do that side, and then do the same on this side. And there we go. I'm going to put that one there for now because this one here I think will fit, yes. So put this one up on the draining board for now. And then we can do this and just swirl the parts off. And this applies to any manufacturer, any kit. You know, a lot of people say you don't need to, a lot of people don't bother. And they're probably right, in all honesty, but I have actually had kits where they're physically oily. And you've seen yourself on here, the instructions tell you, you know, wash the parts in mild soapy water. So we've also got the bonnet here, so we'll give that a little clean. And then this one here, we'll plump it on the top. We'll get as much of it in there as we can. I don't really want to go bending too much because we might end up, you know, distorting the parts. But that can go in like that, that's plenty. Okay, so that's in like that. And I'm going to leave them to soak for half an hour, you know, just, it doesn't really matter. You don't really want it to go cold. And then that the washing up liquid, the detergent will break down any oil that's on there, and we're good to go. So there we are. So it really is as simple as that. Okay, so they've had about half an hour now. The water's nearly cold, and just give them a final quick agitation. We get them up on the draining board. Get that bonnet out of there. There we go. So that's the parts out of the wash now. Now we can clear the soap and we'll be able to see if we've got any loose parts at the bottom of the sink. What I do now is I just take the drain. I'm not sure what sort of, yeah, there's all sorts of different drains these days. But I just tip the drain up on its side. I don't know if you can see that, but I've tipped the plug hole on its side. So there's just a small gap for the water to go out of. But I'm looking around in the sink, I can't see any parts. And as I say, the sprues they're Academy sprues. They're beautifully made. Academy are some of the best. What you need to be really careful with is like the old AMT and the old Ertl kits where you had like, well, and the new Airfix, Jaguar, where you have like a center sprue and all the parts are coming off it. That's when the parts will come off because they're only held on with one tab normally. And normally, as you know, with the old AMT car kits and that, you normally get a box of bits anyway where they already come off. So you need to be a little bit careful. If you have got small sprues, I'd suggest doing this in a bowl, and then you're guaranteed to catch the parts if you do get any loose. So there we go. So I know we've got no loose parts in there, so I'm just going to get the soap suds out of the bottom of the sink. There we go. We can wash the plug off. And there we go. Rinse our hands, and then all we've got to do now is swill the parts off. So what I'm going to do is just hold it under the cold tap and make sure we have no soap suds left on there, because the soap suds will leave marks. I mean, you'll get watermarks anyway. I want to make sure we've got no soap suds on there because they just don't look very nice. And what we're doing is holding the sprues under the tap and making sure we get everything rinsed. Okay. Yes, this is a waste of water. It's terrible. But if you put them in a bath of water, when you lift them out, the soap will come to the surface and you just lift them through the soap and you'll have soap on the parts again. So give them a shake and just stand them up on the draining board and leave them to dry. Simple as that. It's easy as pie. Okay, so there you go. Could do it in a deeper sink or a taller tap, couldn't I really? But, could do it in the kitchen sink really. Got much more room in there. That's that. That's them all swirled off now. We'll do the same for the last sprue. Give it a good shake, and then what we'll do is we'll leave them overnight to dry, and job done. Just a thought there, guys. I did do something quite silly. I swirled the parts off and I took the plug hole out of the sink. I shouldn't have done that. I should have left the plug hole in the sink loosely so that any parts that did come off the trees would have been caught. So yeah, if you're doing this at home, make sure you've got some sort of filter gauze or the plug or whatever. I mean, you could get your sponge and put the sponge over it. It's just something to stop any small parts rushing down the plug hole as you go. Okay, so that's my little ass covering speech. Okay, here we are finally at the bench, and we're going to be doing some building at last instead of talking and stuff and washing and stuff. So we've got the box here, obviously. We'll get the box open, and we've got all our parts in there, all nice and freshly washed. Okay, as I said, these videos are aimed at total beginners, so bear with me if you have some things you need to get off your chest. But I can see here straight away on that part there, we still have some traces of oil. So it could be that it's actually in the plastic. So what I'm going to do now is get a cotton bud. I'll get some IPA, which is basically alcohol. Don't use anything stronger. Don't you go using cellulose thinners or anything. And I'm just going to get this on a cotton bud. And I'm just going to wipe over. Let's see if it removes it. And it doesn't. Well, yes, it does that bit. Okay, so obviously this oil, yeah, it's very resistant. So obviously there is oil on there that is resistant to washing up liquid. So yeah, washing your parts in mild detergent is probably not strong enough, because I'm giving this a good hard rub with some IPA and it is getting it off. But we'll just have a look and see if there's any more. There's a little bit on there. This doesn't matter because it's all going to be it's inside a sandwich. You've got the inner wall going onto the outer wall, and it's behind it, so it's not going to really matter. But there we go. So all in all, washing your parts, yes, do it. It's a good habit to get into. I can't see any reason to not do it. But obviously, in this case, as it would be on camera, wouldn't it? The oil that was there, that I could see, wasn't removed by the washing in detergent. But you can guarantee, if you look at your parts after you've washed them compared to before, you can see they aren't as shiny. The plastic is not as shiny, so you've probably removed some film. The other thing to do is, don't go having a packet of crisps and then start making your model, or don't go eating a pasty or something. You don't want any excessive grease on your fingers. You're always going to have oils on your fingers because your skin naturally has oils in it, but you don't want to be, you know, forcefully putting grease on there. What we will do is any major parts, we can degrease them first, same as I've just done. Bit of IPA on a cotton bud, wipe over, and that'll get rid of any superficial grease that's on the surface. So we've got our parts here now, all cleaned up, ready to go. So we're going to get our instructions, which we've familiarised ourselves with, if you remember. And I'm going to be chopping and changing my modelling boards, I think, because basically I'm trying to find what works best for the camera. Now on the back of here I have some stickers. These are the people that you know, supply stuff for the videos and everything. But unfortunately it's all look a bit glary and stuff, so I'm just going to go for the plain side first, and we'll see how we get on with that. And I've also got the green mat. There's some, what's that on there? There's some stuff on here. I don't know what it is. I've never used this mat, so anyway, there we go. Right, so we've got our instructions. We've already gone through everything I was going to say, so we're going to go into the build. So I won't keep the instructions on screen because, as you can see, it makes the screen go dark. Okay, so I'm going to have the instructions over here. But first of all, we're going to look at step one, and it's telling us to remove parts from the sprue. So we've got the two main chassis rails here. These are on the A sprue, and then we've got all the rest are on the D sprue. So first thing we're going to do is get these parts off the sprue and ready to go. So we don't want, that's the D sprue, so we do want this one. So we want part D50. Now initially I'm going to use these are the cheaper nippers you can get. These are the ones that come free with a kit from Dave Coley, if you're lucky, from Dave Coley's Emporium. And these are the cheap ones. Now if you're using, I say cheap, I don't mean cheap and nasty, they're just cheaper than these. These are like a couple of quid, and these are literally £30. So, you know, you pay your money, it takes your choice. If you're using these, if you've got the cheaper end of the market, don't go right up to the part and cut. Okay, don't go right up to the part like that and cut. Just lay back a little bit, a millimetre or something. Just lay back and cut like that. Okay, because what will happen if you cut right up to the part with the less expensive nippers, what you'll generally find is you will pull a chunk of plastic out. Now one of the problems with these straight away, because you've got this fairly sharp ground angle on here, when you go to cut the part off, as you can see, as I go to cut the part off, it's cutting, you've got that radius on there, it's the cutters are sliding down. Whereas if you get the more expensive type of cutter, the Tamiya cutters here, they enable me to cut a lot further back. Okay, so you can see as I close these up, look how far the cutter away is from the part. And then when I close these up, as you can see, it's pulling it right up to the part. So I'm not going to use those anymore. I'm going to use these because they might ruin my model. If you don't have a nice pair of cutters like this with a fairly shallow angle on the back, the way to cut your parts off with these less expensive ones is to, what do we want, D37. D37 is to cut the sprue back here. Okay, cut the sprue way back so you cut loads off, and then you'll be able to perhaps cut. Now you can see when I try and cut this, it's pushing, because of the radius on that sprue, it's pushing the part down. So I'm going to use these because it enables me to lay back. Okay, so cut that off of there, cut that off of there. If you have really expensive cutters like your God Hands, or if you've got a brand new pair of the Tamiya, the Trumpeter single-sided cutters, you can afford to go right up to the part and cut because it won't pull chunks of plastic out. If you've got the cheaper ones, you can't do that, or if you've got those and they're worn out, you can't do that. So you want D13, which is here. I'm looking at these parts, they're all going to be easily identifiable once they're off the sprue, so I don't need to worry about. But if they were all sort of very similar but only of slightly different lengths, then I'd be leaving them on the sprue so I have the numbers. D52 is here, so we'll cut that one off like so, and then we've got D12, which is here. So that's the D parts taken care of. Then we've got the A parts here. So cut these off. As I say, you can see what I'm doing. I'm laying back away from the part so I leave some of the sprue nib on there. And then back on here, cut that away. And there we go. So that's all the parts we need for our chassis. Okay, so now what we've got is all our parts, and they've all got these little lumps on them, little sprue nib lumps. So I'm going to come along with my cutters and just laying off the surface, just to remove the excess. Okay, what I actually do, I put the cutters flat down onto the face. Okay, so it's butted up like that. And then I just literally tip them slightly and cut. Okay, flat onto the face, get that piece of sprue out of the way. Flat onto the face, like so. And then tip them slightly and cut. And that just leaves a tiny little bit of sprue nib on there. Flat on the face, tip them, cut. Alright, so now we've got those cleaned up. Now we come along with a sanding stick. Now I've got here, this is an Infini, it's called a Matador stick. This is a 400 grit. You get these from Premium Hobbies in the UK. Basically, it's what I like to use for pretty much everything. I've left a sprue nib on the end there. It's what I like to use for pretty much everything. And 400 grit I find is a great grit for general sanding. So you can see here, this area here is flat. So I can come along with my stick and just basically sand until that nib is gone, and I can feel that it's gone. Okay, again on here this area is pretty flat, so again I can just sand on there. Again, same on here. And we're just sanding away that sprue nib. Okay, so that part is now all cleaned up. We've got no sprue nibs left. Do the same on this one. just like so. And if you notice, I'm not just ploughing in like this, because what happens, you can end up leaving marks that you don't want to leave. So it's just a gentle movement over the part just to remove the sprue nib. You don't want to be going in there and hacking it away, because you'll start making a mess. Okay, now the other thing we can notice on here, we have what's called ejector pin marks. Now what happens when the part is, I've covered this loads of times on my channel, but I'm basing this at newbies, remember. So this is your plastic sprue. So obviously this is made in a mould. The mould comes in two halves. You can see there's a seam line around the middle here. All the way out, there'll be a seam on every single part. And what happens is you have two mould halves that come together, boom, plastic is injected, and then the part moulds come apart. Generally moulds are this way, sometimes they're horizontal, but generally injection moulding tools work horizontally. So mould comes together, plastic is injected, mould comes apart. Now obviously the sprue will stick to one half of the mould. It won't just fall out, it will stick to one half of the mould. So the designer makes the sprue to make it stay in the side where the ejector pins are. So if this is the side here where the plastic is, say the plastic is injected on this side, okay, your ejector pin marks, your ejector pins will also be on this side. So basically the plastic is injected, the sprue is made, okay, the tool opens, and the sprue will stay in one side. Okay, and I've got it the right way around. So that sprue's like that, okay, so the tool opens and the plastic will stay in this side of the tool. So tool comes together, plastic's injected, and the part is made. Okay, tool opens up. Now they need to get the tool away, so they have what's called ejector pins, and they are basically pins in the part that come out. You can see in the back of the front mud guards here, you've got these marks. They're ejector pin marks there. You can see on the back of the radiator there, there's 4 of them. You've got ejector pin marks in there. There's ejector pin marks on those parts. There's ejector pin marks in the engine sump there. On the back of the radiator grille. Back of these parts here. In the backs of the wheels. So what they're doing, because they have to get the part out nicely without breaking anything, there'll be lots of ejector pin marks all over the place. You can see on here these round parts on the end of the sprue nibs. They're actually ejector pin marks as well. So there's hundreds of these pins. Just push the sprue out and keep it all nice and straight. And then there'll either be an operator there that'll grab it, or it'll fall on, or a robot will come up and take it, whatever. But invariably it'll fall into a hopper and then go down. Fall into a hopper, slide down. You will also see on some kits, this is going a bit advanced now, you will see these sprue nibs that stick out. I don't think we've got any on here. I haven't seen any on this kit. Yeah, you will sometimes see sprue nibs that stick out, and they are called Z-pins, and the reason they're designed like that is so when the ejector pins come out, the part is actually suspended on the pins. You'll see a lot on main kits. So the ejector pins, so you've got the tool is like this, the ejector pins slide out from behind, like so, and if you've got the Z-pin, it's like a half a hole left on the, if you imagine the ejector pin's got a slot in it, so the moulding is a reverse of that, and basically what it does, it holds the sprue. So as the ejector pins come out, the sprue is held on the ejector pins rather than just falling down. So that's what that's all about. So there's your lesson for today. Now the trouble is with ejector pin marks, they are very unsightly. Now these are actually on the insides of the chassis rails. So you may say, doesn't matter, they're on the inside, just leave them. But sometimes you will have them on the inside of doors. I did notice them here on the inside of a panel. Here you go. The inside of the, I'm not sure if that's the bulkhead or the rear panel, that's the bulkhead. You've got them here. Now we're going to have to get rid of those because they look horrible if we're having the back doors open. On this one we probably won't, but we'll probably get rid of them anyway to show you how I do it. So good practice. To be a good modeller, get rid of ejector pin marks. Even though they're on the inside of the chassis rails, they don't look very nice. And the way to get rid of them, if they are raised, like these mainly are, you can sand them away. If they are lower, they need to be filled. So the best way to do that is to come along with a pencil and just scribble some lines over these ejector pin marks, like so. Okay, and then I can use my 400 grit sander again, nice and flat on the surface. Just gently sand over the surface. And we can see straight away that what we've got is a little bit of, the chassis is kind of a little bit hollow in the middle. Alright, so that's okay, we're just getting rid of these ejector pin marks, or most of them anyway. So as you can see here, where I'm sanding, you can see the pencil line either side of the ejector pin mark. So obviously the ejector pin mark is raised, so we're going to sand it to get rid of it. There we go, you can see there that one's raised. Now what's happening here, which is very unusual, is the plastic, the chassis rail is not flat. The chassis rail is sunken all along the middle. So in other words, instead, if you're looking at along here, if you're looking at along from this end, instead of it being a flat side, it's actually, it's like this, it's lower in the middle. So when you sand it, it's kind of sanding the outside of the chassis rail edges, but not the inners. So at this point it's up to you what you want to do with it. I will show you later in the build about how to fill sinks and how to fill ejector pin marks. So, you know, that one back there is fine, but we want to be really careful. You see, there's a perfect situation there where we may have to glue something there, and if you've got an ejector pin mark, it will cause you issues with the fit. So what we can do, we can either carry on and keep sanding here to get rid of these marks, or we can just leave it as is. We've got rid of the ejector pin marks that are sticking out. Okay, there's a little one on there. Just gently sand that one. And there's a little one in that corner there. Alright, so as you can see, what's happening you can see by the where it's sanded and where it isn't, you can see that the chassis is kind of hollow in the middle. So we could come along and fill that and sand it all flat if you want to, or not. Up to you. We'll do the same on this one. We get the pencil over these ejector pin marks. I can see these are raised. As I say, this is not 100% necessary. It's not something you have to do. You need to do it if there's going to be parts going on where you can see on here straight away the ejector pin mark is raised, because you can see the pencil around it and the ejector pin mark is sanded. So we just carry on sanding there. Same here, sand away there. And this is a 400 grit stick, remember guys, this is not like a great coarse sanding stick that's going to start ripping loads of material out. This is just basically, it's almost like, you know, giving it a rough polish, if you like. And there you can see exactly what I'm talking about. The outer edges of the chassis rail have been sanded, the ejector pin mark has been sanded, but the inside, the middle of the chassis rail, is not sanded, so it's hollow. Now, I'm not going to carry on sanding to get rid of it, because you might end up with fit issues down the line. What we don't want to do is give ourselves problems further down the line. What I'm going to do. So there we are. So what we could do now, we could go on and fill that, or we could just leave it as it is. Entirely up to you. What I would generally use for that, if you look at my other videos, you'll see there's a product here called Mr. Surfacer. Come here. This is the 1000. This is what I generally use all the time, and I would paint that on and then sand it back, and I would end up with a perfectly flat inner surface. Now, because this is a beginner's build, I'm not going to do that on this one at the moment. It is the inside of the chassis rail. It's not a great eyesore, but it is good practice to get rid of ejector pin marks if you can. Okay. So, in fact, I will fill them, because that is good practice. So you can see how to do it, and then you can decide on yours whether you want to bother or not. I'm just going to clean up the sprue nibs on these parts here. Again, lay it on the surface flat, just lift it slightly, lay it flat, tilt it slightly, then you can sand it. On edges like this where it's square, I would recommend doing this. Don't go like that, because when you start using the stick like this, that's when you exaggerate, you tend to sort of round things off. So if you just sand it in one direction, you will generally end up with a nice flatter, squarer surface than you will if you start going in and sanding from both directions. Now here, if you remember, I used those cheaper cutters, and I had to go right up to the surface. And we can also see on here, we have a mould line. You can see this. See this line going around there. I'll get a pencil and just highlight it. When I sand it, it'll highlight itself straight away. Okay, you can see there is a line in the plastic. That's a mould line. We need to get rid of that, so we're going to sand that away. Okay. I may have to put a bit of Mr. Surfacer in there to fill it in. Same here. Yeah, that's quite a deep mould line there, so we're probably going to put some filler in there. Obviously, if you don't want to, you don't have to, but I will. I will make sure throughout this video, if there's something that I feel is absolutely necessary, I will tell you it's absolutely necessary. If it's just something that's a nice to have, or something that I'm doing just because I want a nice model, then I will tell you that. The other thing, when you've got sanding sticks, they get blocked up with plastic. Okay, get yourself an old pair of jeans, some denim, old pair of shorts, whatever, cut the leg off, and then what you can do is wipe your sanding stick on there and it comes out like new. Okay, I often do it on my jeans that I'm wearing, and I end up with holes in the front of my thigh. So there we go. So we've got these here as well now, so we're going to cut the sprue nibs off of these. Got my nippers are full up with lumps of plastic, so cut the lumps off of them just like so, and then again single stroke on there, just like that. And then cut that one off of there, cut that one off of there, single stroke, just like that. Right, and we've got one in the middle down there we want to sand out. So what I've got here is a skinny stick from Flory Models, which I think are no longer available, but you can get these in all sorts of different guises. You can get the Albion hobby ones. I mean, these are absolutely knackered. These have had it. You can get the Albion hobby ones. You can get UMP ones. At the moment, Infini don't actually make any skinny sticks. I wish they would, because they'd be the best. But, we've also got an ejector pin mark on there. In fact, we've got 3 ejector pin marks on there. So I'm going to take this cross member and just gently sand it on there. And we can see that all 3 of the ejector pin marks are raised. So there we go, they're gone. Right, so we're ready to start assembling once I've done this Mr. Surfacer bit, because I'm going to show you what I do rather than the quick way. So as I say, the next bit of filming you're going to see is not 100% necessary, but it's something you can do if you want to, and I'm going to do it so that you can see how I do it. I'm going to change cutting mats because we're using paint. Okay, mats changed and gone round. I found some more ejector pin marks, sanded them out. So basically now what we're going to look at is, and as I say, this is for beginners, I'm going to keep saying it over and over again. We can see on here we have ejector pin marks. Okay, these are on the inside of the chassis rails, so they're not going to be an issue. You're not really going to see them. But sometimes you will get kits from other manufacturers where, and yes, even Tamiya do this, they will put ejector pin marks in highly visible places. So there are even kits out there. I think there's a Tiger Hobbies kit of a tank where they have actually got ejector pin marks on the outside of the turret and none on the inside. The turret is made up of plates, and it's just crazy. And this is where the manufacturers don't really think about what they're doing. Unfortunately, ejector pin marks are they're needed. You have to have them unless the sprues are very small. If you look at Models Vit kits, if you look at the reviews I've done of Models Vit kits, they don't have ejector pin marks because they don't use ejector pins, because the sprues are always very small. So it's good practice to get rid of it. It's good practice to actually do it if you're a newbie, because then if you mess up on here, it doesn't matter because it's the inside of the chassis rail, and then you're well practiced for what to do when you come to do a part that will be seen. So in here we have not only ejector pin marks, but we have the, as I said, we have the chassis shrinking as well. You can see on there, if I can catch it in the light, you can see on there that basically we've got an ejector pin mark, and then around it you can see it's hollow in the middle. So I'm going to take my Mr. Surfacer 1000, I'm going to give it a good stir, and yes, this is no way to treat a brush, but you don't want to be using nice brushes in Mr. Surfacer. I only use old, worn out, knackered brushes. Okay, so you can see this thing, I mean, it's at the end of that, it's well past its sell by date, but you don't need the accuracy with this as you do with normal paint. So all I'm going to do is come along, and as thin as I can get away with, I will put paint, we'll put the Mr. Surfacer in the areas where I've got some shrinkage, which is basically the whole thing looking at it. Now unfortunately what this does, this slows us down because we have to wait for this to dry and then sand it. Now the other thing to bear in mind, in case I forget to say, we don't need to do anything with that back one, that's absolutely fine. Just going to put some along the centre because we know it's sunken. So there we go, so we've brushed that on there, and we can just leave that to dry. As I say, this is Mr. Surfacer 1000, you can get it from Premium Hobbies. Here, use the code NMB10, that's my code, NMB10, and you'll get 10% off. If you're only going to buy one bottle, get the 1000. If you want something a bit thicker, just get some, okay? Pull it up onto the side of the jar like so, on the inside, and just let it sit there, and it will thicken up in minutes. If you want something a bit thinner, pour some into a little pot or something, add some Mr. Colour Leveling Thinner, this stuff here, which is the best thinner there is, I think. Add some of that to it and you can thin it out, or you can buy the full range. I've got the whole range here, many bottles of it. There's all different colours and all sorts. So basically the same on here. We're going to come along, paint this into the areas where it's needed, where it's shallow. Remember, it does shrink back, this stuff. I can't remember if I said that. It does shrink back, so you want to be putting, you know, like a heavy coat on, more than you would if you were sort of painting something. And I stress again, I'm going to keep saying this, you don't have to do this. This is just something I like to do, and for the newer modelers out there that want to do it as well, then you can do it too. Okay, so once again, I'm just painting over these ejector pin marks because they are slightly shallow. This is okay. This one's okay. This one has ejector pin marks along its top edge, but honestly it doesn't really matter, we'll just put some on there anyway. But this is going to be covered by the floor, so you're not going to see these. But depends what kind of modeler you want to be. if you're going to, I mean, some people don't even bother painting cockpits because they'll say you can't see it. For me, from my opinion, if it's kind of, I tend to say, you know, it's in the model, it's nice to have, it's nice to see. You may well learn something from it, from building it and painting it. You know, even though you're not really going to see it when it's done, you know it's there. You know, I mean, some of the Trumpeter 32nd scale aircraft kits have full engine detail and no way to display the engine. So do you want to go painting the engine and weathering it and all that and then just covering it up? Probably not, but you may want to, who knows. But we've got mould lines on the inside of here as well. We've got mould lines in there. Okay, and I also noticed on this front section, I noticed off camera, we have some horrible ejector pin marks in the top of the chassis rail. Now these here are going to be covered by the fenders, but I think those there will be visible on the finished model behind the bumper. So I'm just going to put a drop of Mr. Surfacer on them. Drop in those, because I'm not sure if they're going to be visible or not. And then a drop in there, because again, I'm not sure if they're going to be visible or not. And what I may well do when it comes to assembling this chassis, this whole front section is going to go on, as you can see here. So we'll have a join there. You can see down here we have a join. I may well cover that in with filler as well. So we shall see. So what we've got to do now is let that dry, which will take a good couple of hours, and then what I'll do is come back and sand it all flat. Okay, so we've been about an hour and a half now, let that dry, and that should all be nice and hard now. I've been out and done a bit of gardening, so if you see my nails, or what I've got, fingernails are a bit dirty, I'm sorry, I've scrubbed them as well as I can. But I did get them full of peat, not peat, what's the stuff called, like topsoil, I can't think what it's called now. Anyway, so we can go on now and just sand away all this Mr. Surfacer, but no. This is a great tip for newbies. You've got your nice new sanding stick. Don't use it for sanding Mr. Surfacer or paint or whatever. It's really not worth it. You'll clog it up. You can see this one here. This is an old one, and as you can see, it's all clogged. Now, you can clean them out. These are water cleanable, so you can clean them out with water, or you can clean them out with solvents or whatever, but you'll never get them back as good as that. So always keep your old ones. Like here's an old zebra stick here. So there's an old 400, there's a brand new 400, and the difference is quite astonishing. This one's all clogged up, as you can see, this one isn't. So eventually they're all going to get clogged up. That's the way they wear out, because the grit comes off and then the whatever you're sanding builds up between where the grits were. But basically, use old sticks, don't use new ones. And all we're going to do is gently sand over here. Okay, and this stick is quite worn out. This one might be better. You see the point comes where you have to start using your newer sticks, but I don't. These are literally brand new today. I don't want to clog them up with Mr. Surfacer from the get-go. So all we're doing is sanding away. And I'm being careful on this model because we've got this fine detail on the end of the chassis here. I don't want to be sanding that away, so be careful not to hit that. You can see that what we're doing now is sanding away, and what we're left with is a little bit of that Mr. Surfacer, which is like a liquid filler, if you like. People who watch my channel regularly know that I absolutely love the stuff. I use it on everything. I'm often accused of using it on my cornflakes, but basically I'm just sanding that away to end up with a nice flat surface. Now I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to keep repeating myself. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you what can be done to achieve a nice flat surface when you've got all ejector pins and sink marks and all this whole higgledy-piggledy and everything, because that's basically what this is. This from the centre is where the plastic is, as it's cooled, it's shrunk, but luckily it shrunk on that side, not on this side, because this side is all nice. That's our detail side that we're going to almost be able to see. But there we go, and as you can see, I'm just gently sanding this away. The other thing is I've got my dirty mat down because they get all this dust down here and it kind of gets ingrained into things. And there we are. You can see in there, you can see the ejector pin mark. there, which is left in grey. You can see a kind of an ejector pin mark there. There's a little bit there that's still a bit shallow, so I could come along and put some more Mr. Surfacer in there and get that nice and sanded flat. I'm not going to, because we need to get on and get this chassis built. But basically, in fact I might do actually, because I think we're going to run out of time to start looking at getting the chassis built in this. So I think we'll do that in the next video. But yeah, it's going to be pretty slow going to start with, guys, because as I say, I am covering the absolute basics, like, you know, cutting parts off a sprue and sanding and everything like that. Obviously, now we've covered that, we don't need to cover it again. So then we, you know, we get a bit faster and faster until we introduce a new tool or a new process or something. Then that's the way it's going to go. But here we've got this cross member. You can see on there I've got the Mr. Surfacer and I'm just sanding it away. And we can see that those ejector pin marks were all raised because we've completely sanded off everything. We've got no grey left there whatsoever. So that's cool. That one didn't have anything. This little one here had something on the top. Let's see if this one will do this one. Yeah, these really do need to go in the bin. They've pretty much had it. They do last a very long time, these Infini sanding sticks. Oops. And there we go. And I'm sure going on through the build I'll show you another process for removing Mr. Surfacer, and what we do is we get some Mr. Colour leveling thinners on a cotton bud and remove it that way. But that's when you want to retain the detail. I'm sure we'll come across that. So you can see ejector pin marks on the top of here everywhere, there's loads of them. There's Jess going to start having a go now. So we've got ejector pin marks there on the front, we can sand them out. There we go, we've got ejector pin marks on the top of the chassis rail there. So you can sand that one out. More there. And as you can see, it just goes on and on and on. There's loads of them on here. And we've got all these seam lines on the inside and on the outside, so we can just gently sand them away. And as I say, when I join the front to the rear chassis, I may end up having to deal with that seam. If there is a seam there, then I probably will deal with it, so I can show you how we deal with seams. For a quick build, you probably wouldn't bother because I doubt you're ever going to see any of it. But if you want to make it really, really nice and you want to practice some techniques and skills, then why not do it in an area where it's not going to be seen? Yeah, you can do your sanding of all your ejector pin marks and everything now and deal with all your seams on the chassis, and if you mess it up, it's on the inside of the chassis, you're not going to see it. Do it on your model where it does matter and mess it up, then you are going to see it. So I'll go on and get the rest of this sounded and I'll come back. Okay, so I said I wasn't going to do it, but I think I said I wasn't going to do it, but I did it anyway. And I've used black Mr. Surfacer, so you can see I've gone over there where the low spots were. So hopefully now it's dry enough to be sanded. It's only been about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour or so. So we should be able to see that when we sand this, we'll end up with the little area of black left behind. So you can see why I did it, because we had the shrinkage there. Let's use this nice big flat one, it's harder, it's much better for larger flat areas. This is what I was saying, if you're sanding something flat, use a hard flat stick. If you're sanding something round, then you can use a sponge. But I will cover more about sanding when we come to doing assemblies and stuff. But using the right sanding stick is extremely important, especially if you want to keep things flat and square and not lose your hard edges and everything. So there we are. So you can see there it was worth doing. I'm sanding away and you can see the black areas left, and that was where the Mr. Surfacer I put on before just wasn't enough, and it shrank back, and it made me it it required a second application, if you like. I'm not putting any pressure on, I'm letting the sanding stick do the work. If I put pressure in, I'll just gouge everything up. There we go. We can see there that we've got there was quite a deep sink up here with this it's quite a deep ejector pin mark there, so that's going to definitely be left with black there. So there we go. So you can see, worth doing, going over it again. But as I said before, it's not something you have to do, it's just something I've done to show you how to do it, if you need to do it, if you want to do it. Then you've been shown, you know how it goes. So I don't think there's anything else here where I put any black on. No, so we're good to go now. And we're ready to start assembling the chassis. So let's start actually gluing some bits together. So we've got our instructions here and it's showing us all the parts going together. The way Airfix have done this, they've got the red marks there, that's showing you where the parts are actually fitting in and where the glue goes. But only for this, oh no, they've done it down here as well. So it looks like there may be a bit of a theme. You're going to get a red, not all the way through. Yes, you got it here. You're in a few places, but not everywhere. So, right, so we're going to start getting this chassis together. Now, when we look at the chassis, we can see, or if you're in America, it's called the frame. We have these three cross members here, and it looks like that part of the chassis is pretty much parallel because, as you can see here, where I've got them on the board, they're all the same length. Now, when you come down to here, you can see it's narrower at the front. So the chassis is going to come along and then taper in at the front. So we're only going to concern ourselves with these three at the moment because the main thing we need to do is make sure we get this chassis glued together. We need it to be straight. Okay, so basically if we're looking down on top of the chassis as it is here, when it's built it needs to be parallel. Okay, obviously it's going to taper at the front, but the main center section of the chassis needs to be parallel. It needs to be square, so we don't want it like this. Okay, we want it dead square. So we want it parallel, square. Okay, we also need to make sure that it's vertical on the sides, and we also need to make sure that it's not twisted. Okay, if the chassis comes out wrong, if the chassis is twisted, if the chassis isn't straight, if the chassis isn't flat, the whole model will look awful. You'll end up with it sat on three wheels. We are going to build a truck here that's going to sit on all four wheels. Okay, and if we do get an issue with sitting on four wheels, we'll show you how to get around it. So we're going to take these cross members. Now, as you can see in the instructions, they're telling you here, note correct position of square detail. So they're showing you that on that end there is a square lump. So that square lump is going to go to the right hand side. Now it's not very obvious, but it is there, if you can see it. But it is there on the end. So that's going to go to that side. This one here looks to be pretty much symmetrical. And then the rear cross member here, there's no note on there, but you can see that it's kind of L-shaped rather than being like a T-shape. And you can see that they're showing that the top is stepped in this way. So the back section is going to be flat. So we're going to leave that pointing towards the back. And I'm just going to get rid of that excess Mr. Surfacer on there. And there's a bit on the end of there as well that I've managed to brush on there. So we'll get rid of that. Okay, so we're going to make sure that goes in backwards with its flat face facing backwards. This one, as I say, is symmetrical, and this one's got to go in with the lump to the left. So, or the right, should I say. So we're not going to bother ourselves with those two at the moment. We're just going to work on the main rails. So this is the main center cross member here. Okay, and I'm going to concentrate on getting this one in first. Now, I'm looking here, it's kind of got a bit of a rock in it and it's not up to that back face. So I'm going to take my new sanding stick and just sand this area where that ejector pin mark was to get it to go down. I expect we'll have the same, yes we have got the same on this side, that they've got an ejector pin exactly where that cross member is going. So you need to be very careful and get that sanded out. So we want to make sure that this is going to fit in there nice and square, that's better. and then this one's going to go in this side. Yes, that's better. Right, so that's that one taken care of. This one's going to go forward, and the lump is going off to the other side. So that's all good, that's going in okay. And then this rear one is going in, and that's going to fit in fine there. So we'll check them in this side. So the rear one there is going in absolutely fine, and then this one here is going in absolutely fine. So what I'm going to do first of all is glue this one in. Now, you've seen a lot of people doing modelling where they put the glue in first. I always like to put the glue in after. So I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to hold it in place with my thumb, and I'm just going to put a drop of Tamiya extra thin. Now, if you remember, go back to video 1, we talked about tools and we talked about different glues and everything, and I would thoroughly recommend anybody that's doing modelling, whatever level you're at, if you get this one, Tamiya extra thin, you can't go wrong. It's very, very thin, it capillaries around, it's hot so it'll melt through paint, it dries fantastically, and as you can see I've held that in place and just applied it with the small brush, and we've got a really neat and tidy little glue joint. Notice I'm not painting anything first, you don't need to. And then what I'm going to do, now that that glue has gone sort of slightly started to tack off, I'm going to come along here with a rule, and I'm going to make sure the rule is not on here, because the chassis, it is fairly straight. In fact, no, it's not, it's got a bend in it there. So I'm going to make sure this rule is like that, or I can actually come in with it this way and make sure that cross member is square. There we go. If you've got a steel rule, the end of the steel rule will be square. Okay, so that's that one in there. That's nice and square. Alright, and we'll just let that dry for a couple of minutes. Right, that's had a couple of minutes to dry. So I'm going to take this cross member here, this rear one, make sure it's the right way around, hold that in place, and then just gently apply some extra thin into there, let it capillary around. Job done. And we can see that's obviously not square at all. So just pull it back so it's roughly correct, and let the glue just sort of start to gel. What happens is the glue will, it's a liquid as it is, and as it gets into the plastic it will bite in, it will start to melt the plastic, and it will become like, you know, like a thick sauce, and then it'll become like bubble gum before it eventually goes solid. So again, I'm going to make sure this one is square. We can see that I've pushed it a bit too far, so we're going to come in and just give that a tweak. Give that a tweak. And I can see that I've also managed to get it twisted. So I'm going to make sure that when I look along down here, I want it to sit square on the chassis. There we go, that's square now. Okay, now the other thing I can do now is place this, or I could rest this on the chassis on this rule with both the cross members touching and making sure it forms a straight line. That way I know I've got them the right height. Okay, and if you can, as you can see, all this is still flexible. Now I'm going to come along and glue the other side in. So we can hold this in place. Okay. This is probably the hardest part of the kit, so if you are a new beginner and you've managed to get through this, you shouldn't have any trouble with the rest of it. But this is, as a pure beginner kit, a lot of some truck kits have the chassis moulded in one, which is much easier because everything's nice and solid and square, but you don't get the detail because they can't always mould all the detail in that they've got here. So that is now glued together. Okay, now I know that my cross members are square because I've done the check in there. I can do the check again here. I can see that that's all nice and square. Come this way, that way, everything's nice and square, so I know that I'm good there. Okay, now I want to make sure this chassis dries flat, not twisted. Okay, so basically if I just show you here, I want to make sure I don't have that going on. So what I can do, I can raise that up slightly. Okay, now what I've got here is a metal block. Now, I know if you're a beginner you probably won't have one of these, but you can find something flat. The problem is, this is the area where the body's going to sit, so that needs to be parallel and straight. So what I'm going to do is put this chassis down on this metal block. I'm going to leave these curved parts of the chassis back here. I'm going to leave them overhanging because I don't know if they're flat or not. I don't know if they're, no they're not, they're lifting up. So that's the most important part, that flat part there for the moment. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that stays nice and flat and that everything stays nice and square. Now the other beauty of these modelling boards with the squares on them, you can use that to check everything's square. So you can do that, you can put it down and you can look down and see that everything's good. Okay, now I can't look down because basically I'll put my head in front of the camera, but I can look down, put it forward towards me and I can see that everything's good. So that's all nice and square. I'm going to place that on that metal block, making sure that these rear chassis legs aren't are overhanging, so they're not putting any undue pressure on there. I'm going to put a weight on top and just let that dry. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just put another little drop of glue in here and in here, just to make sure that we've got a nice, strong, solid chassis that's not going to snap the first time we pick it up. So there we go, that's our chassis glued together and everything's all nice and square and looking good. Right, so I'm now going to leave that for 3 hours, something like that, and make sure that that's dry, because that is our basis for a nice good model that's going to sit nice and square on all four wheels. So we'll leave that for now and then we'll come back and pick that up. And I think what we'll do, I think we'll come back and pick that up. No, we will keep doing, I was going to say come back in part 3, but we're going to get this chassis all glued together in this part. Right, so we've been, I don't know, half an hour, enough to let these sort of go off, so enough so I can handle it and it doesn't all just fall apart. So now I'm going to glue this cross member. Remember, we've got to get that little square lump that's on there into that side, so that's going to fit into those little cutouts in the chassis there. Okay, so we can come along with our extra thin and just dab some on, just like so, and that will capillary around into the joint. We'll get a little drop underneath as well. I must say, I think the manufacturer could have got slightly better locations for these, because it's quite easy to have them all like this, and the only thing you have is visual to make sure they're good. But again, we can come along with our modelling board with our grid on there and check that everything's square. I can't see, you can, because I can't look over it, but what I can do now is I can move the chassis down and I can look over it without getting my head in the camera, I think. It looks nice and square to me. Okay, so there we go, so that's that one in. And then this cross member here I'm going to leave out. The reason I'm going to leave this one out is because it hangs down. This cross member here hangs down the bottom and it will stop us putting the chassis down flat on the bench, and it's likely to be pushed out of position, so I'm not going to do that. But I am going to glue this one in. Okay, so this one's going to go in that way round, and it's going to go on those legs that stick out, just like so. As we can see, it's a very nice fit. It's a very nice fit actually. What I'm going to do here is just, that one wants to go in a little bit deeper, so I'm going to sand some more plastic off the end of that leg there. Make sure you get it the right way up. And there we go. Okay, so that's our chassis done. What I'm going to do is put some glue in there. Just put a drop in there, let that go round. Just run it down the outside. I want a nice strong joint there because we don't want it just breaking off. I think I might actually make another little video to run alongside this, and I may actually put it out before this one. So I've actually already made part 1 and this is part 2 nearly finished, so I'm ahead of you guys all about gluing, because I'm sort of telling you to put glue here, there and everywhere and not really giving you an idea of what I'm doing. But we can see here we've got an issue there that you may not worry about, but I'll show you how to sort it. We can see that the front, you can see at the front of the chassis, this section here, the actual legs are wider than the chassis legs. So we'll sand all that out and we'll get that all nice. And we'll put some Mr. Surfacer in there as well, I expect, and get a lovely, nice joint. Now, we can once again put the chassis down on the block, check for squareness, make sure it's all good. And another thing we can do, a little test. You can take your sprues, this often works with trucks and stuff like this. And we can look here at the floor, okay? And if we go to the underside of the floor, you can see we have these 4 legs here, 4 legs there. We've got 2 little posts here, and they're going to pick up on the chassis. So what we can do is drop the chassis onto those 4 legs. Just like so. That's dropped down on there, lovely. We've got those front parts are really nice. And then, oopsie daisy, I don't want to go dropping it. And if we push the chassis down, we can see that everything's lining up lovely with the floor. So what you could do is just leave it on there to dry, and you know then that everything's going to set in the right place and nothing's going to be out of position. But I've already done it on my square block, so I don't need to do that. But I do need to make sure that these front joints are nice. Okay. There we are. So you can see now we've got our chassis all built up, and that can dry. And as I say, I haven't put this in because I want to be able to lay it flat and make sure it's all good, and I want to get in there and sand that and everything, so this will get in the way. So we can add that in after we've dealt with that joint. I will also probably be showing you in this video or in another series of videos how we can you don't always have to follow the instructions. In fact, sometimes if you look at my Border Models Lancaster, if you follow the instructions, you can't actually build the model. So, you know, it's good to do these little build alongs, isn't it? So there we are. So that's our chassis done. I'm going to lay that down, let it dry. That's all good. In fact, what I'll do the same as you guys would probably be doing. I'll lay it down on this floor, just like so. Make sure everything lines up nicely. Wow, this is proving difficult. There we go. So that's all there like that now. So that can just be left to dry like that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all soon for part 3. If you've liked this, please hit the like. And don't forget to hit the subscribe. And if you want to see more notifications of videos coming up your way, then hit the notifications bell and you'll get notified of my my content. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.